You got Seth, and I got nothing against Seth Greenberg, but if you're going to go up there and pick a favorite in every game, I mean, why bother? I mean, don't even bother. Just that's it. Just why bother? If you're going to say, hey, we're going to pick every game in the tournament, you can pick the favorite in every game. Why bother to do it? Everyone just say, listen, put the better seed in on each game and move on. I mean, and I know guys who fill out the bracket that way who don't follow college sports. Guys here that I know, they put in the bracket every year. They just put the better seed in all the way through the championship, pick the number one seed.
That's not going to work this year.
And
That's
you know what? This year's probably not going to work either. But I mean, maybe one year it did work. Who knows? I mean, it's possible. But that's if you're going to come out of it with And this year, the real chalk is Ohio State, not Gonzaga, and the 3-1s would be your chalk pick this year because. Really, Ohio State would get more votes than Gonzaga would if you were going to base it on everybody, because people think of Ohio State as being a bigger team than Gonzaga.
Gonzaga is an unknown commodity.
Right.
An unknown commodity.
And they could lose to Pitt in the second round, but you know what? Most of these teams could lose in the second round. But let's start overall. What grabbed you about the bracketing? I'm sure you're going to say the West is weak, right? Like everybody else is saying.
The West is weak. It's wide open. But what happened to Oregon after Oregon wins the Pac-12 tournament after they get off to a terrific start in which they were 18-2, it's really not an oversight. It's an insult. This is a solid basketball team. They've got multiple parts that can really have an impact. They can play big or small. That and really the lack of respect for the Pac-12, a conference that had a bounce-back year, was the number one thing that jumped off at me.
And also, what they're trying to do now, the NCAA tournament, again, chasing the buck. The 4 games are played in Dayton for only one reason, because they have a new TV partner and they needed to give more inventory. That's the only reason. Those games were worthless. They mean nothing. They didn't do it to put 4 more teams in. They did it to create inventory. And now they are keeping teams closer to home and worrying about filling buildings in the first round, which is why you're getting seeding based on filling buildings and geography. And that's why the bracketing is not as good as it was in the past, because they admit we are doing it based on geography now. How does Cal play as a 12 seed and almost play a home game in the first round? It's insane. In the old days, it couldn't happen.
It's unbelievable, but it's something now that is really synonymous with the NCAA tournament, and the teams that are going to deal with that, like UNLV, are on the short end of the stick.
All right, let's start. Pick a bracket. I'll let you start wherever you want. Where do you want to start?
Let's start up top with Louisville, the overall number 1 seed.
All right. Are you surprised Louisville has been as well treated as they have been in the last day?
No, because Louisville, since February 1st, has lost 1 game, the 5 overtime game at Notre Dame. And I talked to Coach Pitino about 9 or 10 days ago, and he let me know that the big changes that were starting to come around for Louisville that weren't there at the start of the season, the development of their bench, which we saw big time Saturday night against Syracuse. Montrezl Harrell, Stephen Van Treese, and also Kevin Ware were terrific. And also Luke Hancock now gives them a guy at the wing position that can do, Mike, and you remember this from last year, what Keurig did. Making shots, making plays.
Critical in their offense.
And, the one thing I think when you look at Louisville, the whole core of the team went to the Final Four last year. Defensively, they're relentless.
Great
defense. They still have, one of the top 5 coaches in the game, if not the best coach in the game. This, to me, other than the 2009 team with Sosa, Terrence Williams, and Earl Clark, this is Coach Pitino's best chance to win a second national championship.
I was thinking of this last night, and I know I was thinking of this Saturday night when they won that game, and maybe this is thinking too much about the person and not enough about the tournament, but this has got to be a very proud time for Rick Pitino.
Yes.
Rick Pitino had watched Calipari take over the state and turn him into almost an afterthought, to where they couldn't beat them. Calipari was the king of everything, and now Pitino, in a year where Kentucky is not in the tournament, takes his team into Lexington, right, to play. I mean, that is unbelievable. And down there, everything's about now, and now Kentucky's not playing. I mean, they're probably in the NIT, right? I didn't even look.
Play at Robert Morris.
I didn't even look. They're in the NIT, I'm sure. I didn't even look who they were playing.
Playing at Robert Morris.
They're playing at Kentucky's playing, and they're not even playing at home. They have the finest on-court. They have the finest freestanding building on campus in America.
You know what the great story about that game is, though, right? You know who grew up in Moon Township, where Robert Morris is? John Calipari.
But how about this? Why would you not have Kentucky, which will draw $15,000 for an NIT game at home, or $12,000. Why not have the game in
I
that
have
building?
to look this up because you get so caught up with the brackets.
Seating?
If a team wins their conference, like a Stony Brook, they get a home game.
Because, let's be honest, they sell tickets if Kentucky plays home. Even in an NIT game, they'll show up. At least, now it holds 24. You might get 15 for an NIT game, but still, Robert Morris can get 4,000 for the game.
And it's going to be all John Calipari's people because he's from Moon Township. His mother worked at the cafeteria.
I don't think John has that many friends. I'm telling you right now, there might not be that many people there. But here's a year where Pitino has taken over now. He's reemerged in the state of Kentucky, which is a big deal because Calipari had completely eclipsed him in the last couple of years.
No, I think that's a fair point, and I think one thing that we're going to see right now is Louisville will be a real trendy pick, as we've talked about, to win this thing, but they've been through it already. This isn't their first rodeo.
I agree.
They've been to the Final Four.
But here's the one thing about them. Siva and Smith can shoot them out of a game, and they will shoot. And Siva is a guy who he can be up here or he can be down here, and he can be like that in the same game. I mean, look at the swing in their game the other day. They are 15 points down in the second half, and they win by, 13, 14 points. And that's unbelievable.
The one built-in thing about Louisville, they are not a good defensive team. They're a great defensive team. They don't need their guards to shoot well to win the national championship.
But they can shoot them out of the game, too. That's the one thing.
Hancock's
they can
the key
shoot
to that
them out of the game.
The kid from George Mason, Hancock's the key to that team.
Because Smith and Siva will take shots, though. And they're going to take bad shots, too. So that's the one thing about them. And I see a game that scares me, but, you don't think they're getting there. But we'll get there. Yeah. Colorado State, Missouri, a typical 8-9, so take your pick.
Power, and more power. Colorado State's the best rebounding team in college basketball. They have one of the more underrated power forward center combinations. Pierce Horning and Colton Iverson. Colton Iverson, a 6'10 guy from Minnesota. Soft hands, a throwback because he's a true 5.
And Missouri's always quick.
Missouri's quick, but it's Missouri's power now that's separated. Mike, think about their front line, and you know him. Alex Oriaki is the 5-man from UConn, who you remember. Lawrence Bowers is the 4, who's kind of turned into a face-up 4 because he's a better perimeter shooter. And the key in this game, and the key for Missouri to play well, a player by the name of Ernest Ross, who really gives them a burly small forward to go up front with Bowers and Oriaki. When he plays well, so does Missouri. But Missouri, they've been enigmatic all year. They're not great away from home. Call me somewhat, I'd say somebody who has a soft spot for the Mountain West and the Atlantic 10. I think that Colorado State, I like Colorado State's experience. They've got veteran guards. I'm going to give Colorado State the nod because of their, I think, they're a little bit more stable in the backcourt with Dorian Green and Wes Eichmeyer. I like Colorado State over Missouri.
Well, listen, Colorado State, people might remember, is coached by Larry Eustace, who years ago was on his way to becoming a big star when he went to a party with a bunch of co-eds and got himself fired. So, his teams were playing great basketball.
2000, they had Michigan State beat at Iowa State.
And that was a great game. That was a
Pfizer
great
and
game.
Jamal Tinsley.
That was a great game. Yeah. It really was. And he was a hot commodity. All right. Oklahoma State is a 5. Oregon's a 12. Everyone looks for a 12-5 upset, and Oregon is not your typical 12.
Oregon is a team that was playing the best basketball out of anybody on the West Coast before their freshman point guard Dominic Artis got hurt, and obviously Gonzaga took that perch as the season progressed. The thing I like about Oregon, they can play big or small. Dana Altman is one of the more underrated coaches in college basketball, and the thing that I like that he did on Saturday night when they beat UCLA for the Pac-12 title, he went to a smaller lineup with Arsalan Kazemi at center. Arsalan Kazemi is a walking double-double, averages about 9 and 9 a game, had 12 and 12 against UCLA. They have the versatility on their roster to do that, Mike. They can play big or play small. I think, Oklahoma State has real blue-chip talent. I'm not certain, though, they'll be able to get by Oregon. Marcus Smart, the point guard for Oklahoma State, is terrific. I think that they're a really solid team, but Oregon won their conference. They can do different things with their roster. I like the Ducks marching on.
All right, one of the sentimental picks of this tournament is St. Louis, which actually I thought could have gotten better than a 4. I mean, how good was St. Louis? St. Louis beat Butler 3 times this year.
And beat New Mexico and VCU twice.
They are a really good team. Now, Jimmy Cruz, who's a longtime coach, goes back to Bob Knight. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Cruz takes over Rick's team. They play like Rick's team. This is a sentimental thing. You saw it this weekend because they played in Brooklyn. There were a lot of stories about this team and Rick, things they still put on the board that Rick told them every game and put on the board. They still put on the board before every game. So this is going to be, for as long as it goes, a very sentimental story. This is a team that I think, if they play Louisville in the Sweet 16, could give Louisville fits because they're tough, they're experienced, they don't turn the ball over, and they're men. They do not back down. This could be a very tough team. They almost beat Michigan State in the second round last year, if you remember. I'm sure you do.
Yep.
People might remember, but they actually could have beaten Michigan State, and it was a great game, a 2-point game, and they're a dangerous team.
They have all the requisites, and I think, the big thing I look at is Coach Majerus' teams, and you know this better than anybody, they took away the three-point shot. Rick's teams last year averaged less than 4 made threes a game. Troy Daniels on VCU last night, Mike, again in the A-10 championship game, one of the best three-point shooters in the country, didn't make a three.
Yep.
I mean, this is what they do to you. St. Louis, though, unfortunately, the way I look at things, they got the short end of the stick because they're in the toughest bracket. But for St. Louis to go far, it's all going to come down to one thing. Can they get enough out of their backcourt in terms of taking care of the ball? They've got 3 really talented upperclassmen guards, Mike McCall, Quamaine Mitchell, and Jordair Jett. But they have to make sure that they minimize their turnovers and don't beat themselves. They're a team, if they can minimize their turnovers, which Coach Majerus' teams always did, and I think not go against a team that has a dominating presence inside, they're good enough to go to a Final Four, but I don't think this bracket sets up for them to do that.
All right, Memphis plays the 11 winner, which is in the play-in games, the 11s. So we'll see what happens. And Memphis is another team that just continues to dominate its league like crazy.
Well, they dominate the league like crazy, but they're the only team from the league in the tournament.
Right.
Now, this is where I'm going to spice things.
They win 30 games every year, this team.
Every year. And Josh Pastner's done a terrific job keeping the talent level at a high level.
Now, last year they got beaten the first round by Majerus.
Now, here's where I'm going to shake things up. Middle Tennessee State, a lot of people don't know about.
But do they deserve to be in the tournament as an at-large? They didn't beat anybody.
But here's the thing. This year in college basketball, we didn't see any teams do what St. Bonaventure did last year. We didn't see a team come into championship week and win a conference tournament that wasn't already projected in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
So because
there were no upsets.
So because we had such a soft bubble, the committee looked at Middle Tennessee State with a good RPI. They dominated the Sun Belt, and they weighed them against Kentucky and Tennessee, and they rewarded the mid-major. Because of the bubble, Middle Tennessee got in.
And one thing you can't do, if you were on the bubble, you cannot go that weekend and get destroyed in a game while they were all watching. And that's what Kentucky did.
Yes.
They got destroyed, played listlessly with the tournament watching with the sets on, and they said, wait a second, look at this team, and that's it. You cannot do that.
Okay.
They don't like that at all.
Now, Middle Tennessee State, and a lot of people haven't seen
So you think they're going to beat Memphis?
I think they're going to beat Memphis, but here's the thing. If Middle Tennessee, Mike, think about this, beats St. Mary's, you have Josh Pastner, who's never won a game in the tournament at Memphis, who's following John Calipari, against the upstart mid-major in the state of Tennessee. In the state of Tennessee, that is an enormous basketball game. Now, a lot of people don't know about Middle Tennessee State. Think a watered-down version of VCU. And, Mike, you love Aaron Kraft, and we know he's one of the best on-ball defenders in the country. Briante Weber of VCU, in my opinion, is second. The 2 point guards for Middle Tennessee State are right in that conversation. Bruce Massey and Tweety Knight. They get underneath you defensively. They make things exceptionally tough to run your offense. He plays 10 guys, 9.8 minutes a game and up. They're a physical team. They play exceptionally hard. The key for Middle Tennessee State is to get enough offense from the outside. If you're watching Middle Tennessee State against St. Mary's, the guy you want to focus on, Ray Cintrone, a 6-foot shooting guard. When he makes threes, they have enough offense. They're a terrific defensive team. I think Kermit Davis's team beats St. Mary's, sets up the all-Tennessee type showdown, and I don't think Memphis will guard like Middle Tennessee State. In this first round for the Midwest region, that's my upset. Middle Tennessee not winning 1, but winning 2 games.
All right. Now, Michigan State, Valpo, I guess we can move on. Creighton, Cincy. Now, Cincy just cannot score.
They can't score. Now, how do you remedy not scoring?
And plus,
you play a team that doesn't guard.
Plus, they played terrible down the stretch of the season.
They played terrible down the stretch of the season. And, I know that they've really had their issues, shooting the basketball and scoring the basketball. But here's the thing. when we have a great offensive team like Creighton that's playing in the Missouri Valley, and you have a terrific defensive team in Cincinnati, because they are. Providence was playing really well coming to the Big East tournament. Cincinnati held them to 44 points. You go with the better defensive team.
Almost every time.
And the one thing, you have all these ancillary pieces that were recruited to play in the Missouri Valley sprinkled around Doug McDermott, who's one of the better players in college basketball. They are not going to know what it's like to deal with Cincinnati-type defense. You can't put the role players on Creighton against a guy like Jaquan Parker on Cincinnati, against a guy like Justin Jackson, and expect them to produce. Now, Cincinnati needs to iron some things out offensively moving forward from the season, but in this matchup, they can lock up Creighton, I think, more than any other team in the bracket. A complete contrast in styles. I like the Bearcats over Creighton.
All right, now we move Duke ahead, and we'll go one more round, then we'll go back after we finish the 4 brackets and get to the regional finals and semis. But Louisville, Colorado State.
Louisville.
All right. Oregon against St. Louis.
Oregon.
You're going Oregon, okay. Michigan State against Mid-Tennessee. You're going Michigan State, and you're going to have a Duke Michigan State, two of the great tournament coaches of all time, meeting in that matchup, which would be a very tough matchup for Duke. Very tough. And a great one. All right, quick break. We'll come back and do Gonzaga on the bottom, the weak West, when we come back. All right, a couple of things. We'll have Brian Cashmere 3 on all the Yankee stuff, going through the brackets right now with John Rossi, who you see on CBS Sports, College Sports Network, and on the CBS network on cable. You'll see him throughout the entire tournament there. So we'll get to all the Yankee stuff to share and everything else going on there. At 3, also Carmelo's out tonight, which I don't think has come as much of a surprise. I have no idea why the Knicks flew him back across the country. I think he wanted to go, and now it made no sense. I don't know yet about Chandler game time decision. They're going to lose tonight again, no question. Then they're going to come home and they're going to have to lick their wounds and start to win on Wednesday against Orlando. That's basically it, because they're going to lose again tonight against Utah, which desperately needs the game to kind of keep pace with the Lakers, who won last night against Sacramento without Kobe in the lineup. All right, Gonzaga is a 1 seed, so they've come full circle. They now are as mainstream can be. A lot of debate about them being a 1 seed. People now want to knock them. They've been Destiny's darling. They have not been great in the tournament in recent years, as we know. All right, so they get through their first round. Then they play the Wichita State winner.
First one of 50 wins. I'm going with Jamie Dixon.
So you got Pitt beating Wichita State?
I got Pitt beating Wichita State.
And then who wins the Pitt-Gonzaga?
I'm taking Pitt.
Which I can understand.
Again, Pitt does not have any great players. They have a lot of good players, but they're too deep at every position. And look, Gonzaga.
How about the Gonzaga center?
Kelly Olynyk, terrific. How about Gonzaga's guards? That's to be determined.
And Gonzaga is a school that usually has great guards, and they don't have a great guard this year.
Well, and another thing, and this is what I've used, and I compare it to like when you're breaking down the NFL draft. If you have a tailback that's running the 40 against tight ends getting ready for the draft, is that really a strong barometer?
No.
Gonzaga hasn't played a team that really belongs in the NCAA tournament since Oklahoma State on December 31st. They played Butler on January 19th. Butler didn't have Rodney Clark. And they played St. Mary's 3 times. And St. Mary's, I'm not sure if they belonged in the bracket.
I thought Gonzaga was good when I saw them in December. I haven't seen them since then. I thought they were good then. What I worry about is carrying the weight of being a 1 is very difficult. It's a whole different set of encyclopedias. They do have a good center. He's a really good player. Their guard play, though, and usually their guard play is pretty good. It's not great this time. It's going to be interesting to see. Wisconsin against Ole Miss. Ole Miss stunned Florida. Wisconsin is one of the hardest teams to prepare for in the entire tournament.
And I don't know. I
think they win this game.
Ole Miss's bigs, okay, there's only 2 of them now, because one thing that happened with Ole Miss was 6-1 in the SEC, and then Aaron Jones, who was the first big off the bench, tore his ACL. That's what really caused them to wind up on the bubble. I don't know if their bigs, Reggie Buckner and Murphy Holloway, can deal with the discipline of Wisconsin's bigs playing on the perimeter. I like Wisconsin. Now, here's something interesting, Mike. Kansas State plays the winner of Boise State and LaSalle. LaSalle's a team finished 3rd in the Atlantic 10, beat Butler and VCU. I'm going to find out today if Steve Zack, who's LaSalle's starting power forward, averaged about 6 points and 6 rebounds a game, is going to play. He missed the A-10 tournament. He's meeting with doctors today to get reevaluated on injury. If Steve Zack plays, I like LaSalle over Boise State. And then Bruce Weber's done a terrific job at Kansas State, but they play a small ball with a 6'6" power forward in Shane Southwell. LaSalle plays the same way. LaSalle, to me, has had the most underrated backcourt in college basketball this season. And people might say, well, how are you going to pick LaSalle against Kansas State? Ramon Galloway, who plays for LaSalle at shooting guard, transferred from South Carolina. Tyrone Garland, who's another one of their guards, transferred from Virginia Tech. And their point guard, Tyreek Duran, can play against any point guard in the country. So if Steve Zack plays for LaSalle, I think LaSalle, similar to Middle Tennessee State, would have a chance to win multiple games.
Arizona is a team that not only has talent, has one of the better kept secret coaches in the tournament.
Terrific.
Sean Miller who was a great point guard at Pitt, has had a great run. Xavier has gotten basically to the final 8 almost every year, with Sean Miller was the coach there. He is a terrific tournament coach.
No, I mean, Sean Miller, and I said this to somebody in an interview today, what Jim Harbaugh is for the NFL right now, that's what Sean Miller will be in college basketball for the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And when you look at this bracket, and we both agree, and you pointed this out when I first saw you today, this is the most wide-open bracket.
It is. Everybody loves New Mexico.
Arizona has clearly the most talent in this bracket. Now, I have been a big advocate for New Mexico the past couple of weeks because, to me, New Mexico was much more deserving of a 1 seed than Gonzaga because New Mexico won the Mountain West, which was ranked as the top conference in the country this year. But I don't like Arizona standing in the way of New Mexico and Salt Lake City. I like Arizona beating the Lobos in the round of 32 and marching on.
All right, and then on the bottom, Notre Dame, Iowa State.
Notre Dame, Iowa State. Notre Dame's guards I trust a little bit more. Eric Atkins, Jerry Grant. Iowa State relies a lot on the 3. Mike Bray is really patented the burn offense. I'm going with Notre Dame, and I want to point this out, and I heard what you were saying before I came on, and I love Aaron Kraft just like you. I like Iona's matchup with Ohio State because Ohio State cannot score. That is one thing about Ohio State. Now, when you think about this game, this is not a vintage Ohio State team in terms of size.
You think Iona can play him?
I know Iona can play him.
Wow.
The key to this game is a player by the name of Trey Bowman. Trey Bowman for Iona is a guy that allows the Gales and Tim Cluse to play small. When you look at Ohio State this year, they're a small team. Deshaun Thomas is their 4-man, and really the past couple of weeks, Evan Ravenel, who's 6'5 and a half, 6'6", is playing their 5 spot. But the one thing the NCAA tournament has always been is a canvas for superstars that people don't know about to paint on. Mm-hmm. David Lowry from Iona. A lot of people don't know him. He's a mid-major version of Royce White. In fact, the Iona staff, when they got David Lowry, contacted the Iowa State staff to think about using the same type of sets that Fred Hoiberg used for Royce White last year. I went and saw him at LaSalle in December, the first game he played when he was eligible, 21 points and 14 rebounds in 26 minutes. This is the guy to watch when you're watching Iona against Ohio State. He has no business being in the MAC, but what Iona's done the past couple of years, they've become a major landing spot for high-profile second-chance kids. David Lowry is another one. And again, think about this. Ohio State doesn't have a Jared Sullinger to get a David Lowry in foul trouble. They're not that type of a team on the front line. Again, Ohio State, terrific defensively, and they've been playing Kraft and Shannon Scott together, which makes them better defensively, but they're not a great offensive team. This is a fascinating game, but the two keys, David Lowry, will Tim Cluse put him in point-forward type situations, and Trey Bowman. Can Iona get enough on the boards to go small with Lowry and Bowman up front?
All right, let's get 4 out of this. You got Pitt, Wisconsin, or Kansas State?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, LaSalle, Wisconsin. Yeah. Arizona and you like Ohio State?
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Whoa. So Notre Dame beats Iowa State, and Notre Dame so Notre Dame is in the Sweet 16. Notre Dame is not a great tournament team because they get beat where they come up against quickness they can't handle in this tournament.
It's not Ohio State.
I know. It happens every year. It doesn't happen in these first 2 games. Can they shoot well enough to play with these teams?
Pat Connaughton, Notre Dame's wing, 15 threes in the last 3 games.
That's the key.
And there's another kid for Notre Dame who hasn't played well recently, but he's due. He's a freshman. Cameron Beedscheid. He's another guy that has to play well for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's backcourt, Grant and Atkins, they don't get talked about them on the top perimeter duos in the country. They deserve a place at the table.
All right, let's get this bracket down to 4 fast. The South. We got Kansas. We got Carolina, Villanova. You got NC going against Kansas?
Yes.
So we got the game that everyone wants on the weekend, Kansas, NC, which will be a huge profile game. So Kansas, NC. All right, and then we have VCU and Michigan,
Yes.
I would think, which is another fascinating game. And then we have UCLA against Minnesota. You got Minnesota winning
Minnesota,
that game? Everybody in America has Minnesota winning that game.
UCLA cannot deal with interior presences that give them problems. Minnesota's two really good ones.
Florida moves ahead. We know that. San Diego State or Oklahoma?
Oklahoma.
All right, and then Georgetown.
Yep.
And let's go through and get them to one more foursome. Kansas, NC. Who wins?
Kansas.
All right. VCU, Michigan, who wins?
VCU.
I know a lot of people picking Michigan out of the tournament early this year. Minnesota, Florida.
Florida.
All right, and then Georgetown against Oklahoma.
This could be an upset. I'm going to take Georgetown, but keep your eye on Lon Kruger's team. They're playing better as the season goes along. That could be an upset. Romero Osby for Oklahoma has taken a massive, massive leap.
We'll do the East with John, then we'll come back and we'll whittle it down once we hit the regional weekend. We got one more bracket, then we will whittle it down from 16 right after this. All right, we're back. We're talking with John Rothstein, who will be on CBS throughout, and you can see them. They have 100 hours of programming coming up, really wall-to-wall, as you would expect, on the CBS Sports Network. 100 hours during the tournament of live programming with all the different coaches, ex-coaches, and himself and everybody. All right, Indiana gets the LIU. First of all, who wins LIU? James Madison.
James Madison, starting center, Rayshawn Goins, was arrested yesterday. I think that's a big factor in the game.
Did he do something really bad?
I mean, it's yet to be determined if he's going to play. If he plays, I think James Madison wins the game.
Okay.
If he doesn't play, I like LIU. You got to remember, LIU's playing without the NEC Player of the Year in the middle in Boyd. So that's
I didn't
a
even
big
realize
difference.
he was hurt. All right, Indiana wins the game. We know that. We move on there. NC State against Temple. NC State was overrated all year. Temple's always a tough out. What do you think?
Go with Fran Dunphy.
All right. UNLV Cal.
Great talent at UNLV. I'll take the Running Rebels for one game. Then I think the Cuse, which I think got a really good draw, wins against Montana and then gets the showdown with Indiana in Washington, which could look orange if Syracuse gets there.
All right. Butler, it's funny, years and years ago, Bam used to have trouble in these games. Doesn't seem to have as much trouble in these games anymore as he used to. Years ago, they used to stumble once in a while in these games. Not so much anymore. Butler, Bucknell.
Everybody loves Bucknell. It's
Be careful beating Butler.
It's a bad matchup.
I would not pick against that coach in the first round. I don't care. I know it's not a vintage team, but I'll tell you right now, that guy is as good a coach as there is in the country. I am not picking against Brad Stevens in the first round. I don't care who they're playing. I'm picking them.
Now, Marquette and Davidson is an interesting game, and people filling out your brackets are going to want to listen to this. Davidson has had a terrific year. Much of the core is back from last year's team that lost to Louisville. Really good 4 and 5 combination with Damon Brooks and Jake Cohen. Great passing big men. But Clinton Mann, who's their top front court reserve, Mikey, at 13 points in the tournament game last year against Louisville, has missed action since January. Bob McKillop told me he may play. If they have another big to go against Marquette, that would make a big difference. But I like Marquette. I think Marquette's the sleeper team in this region, so I think you'll have Marquette and Butler.
All right, Illinois and Colorado.
Colorado. Love the Buffaloes. Tad Boyle might be the most underrated coach in the country, and then Miami beats Pacific.
All right, Indiana Temple. We move the Hoosiers through.
Yeah,
UNLV Syracuse.
Yeah, we go with the Cuse.
All right, Butler and Marquette.
Going with Marquette behind the leader of the Golden Eagles, Junior Cadogan. They're 14-2 when he has 2 turnovers or less in a game.
All right, Miami and Colorado.
That's where things get interesting.
You're going to pick Colorado?
The Buffaloes, who, again...
See, I disagree with you. That team is very, very experienced, all seniors, with a point guard and Larkin and a great coach. I think they won the ACC regular season.
You're right.
And the postseason. You're not giving them enough respect.
I've been on the Miami bandwagon all year long, and again, I think that you're right. I think they have all the ingredients. Here's the thing that's changed about Miami. When they came into the season, they were a team that was centered around Reggie Johnson. Since he's come back from a thumb injury, he has only scored in double figures a handful of times. They have become a team that's more comfortable with Julian Gamble at the 5 and Kenny Kaji at the 4. Colorado has the type of personnel, and they have one of the guys who I think could be one of the rising stars in this tournament in Spencer Dinwiddie. Tad Boyle, as I said, might be the most underrated coach in the country. They have, I think, the most underrated freshman in the country in Xavier Johnson.
So you're picking Colorado.
You got to roll the dice somewhere.
That's an interesting one.
Colorado.
Right. Let's go back to the top of the bracket. On the other side, we're in the Sweet 16 now. Now, your Sweet 16 has Colorado in it. It has VCU in it. It has Notre Dame in it. It has Arizona in it. It has Pitt and Wisconsin in it. So it's got Oregon in it. So it's got some surprises. Now, Louisville, Oregon, you're going with Louisville. All right, Michigan State and Duke.
Michigan State. Now, I want to point something out. A lot of people are wondering, well, how is Michigan State going to play Duke? Michigan State has a guy in Brandon Dawson that Tom Izzo starts at small forward with Derek Nix and Adrian Payne, but will slide him down to the 4. He can play it at 6'6" if they go to a 3-guard lineup. That's the type of guy that would guard Ryan Kelly in that game, Brandon Dawson. So I think we have Louisville, Michigan State in a rematch of the 2009 regional final, which Michigan State won in that region.
Now let's go to the bottom, into the West. We have Pitt and Wisconsin in this round. Who are you picking?
Wisconsin.
All right, Arizona and ND.
Sticking with the Wildcats, Arizona and Sean Miller.
All right, then we go up to the top. We have Kansas and VCU.
Kansas has had big problems with point guard play the entire year. Again, VCU, I think, is going to be a difficult team to play.
Shaka Smart comes up through this thing again this year, man. I'm telling you, how are they going to keep him there?
I'm rolling the dice on VCU, and I think Florida beats Georgetown. And again, Shaka Smart, this is a storyline, Mike. How about this? Shaka Smart worked for Billy Donovan.
I know, sure.
So there you go. There's VCU, Florida. Now, Indiana-Syracuse, to me, when the bracket first came out, and I said this last night on CBS Sports Network, that's the game. That could be one of those epic Sweet 16 colossal games, because you have Indiana, who a lot of people think, has all the requisites to win the whole thing. They've been the team that's been at number 1 most of the season, against Syracuse in D.C. Remember when Syracuse won the title, they played in Albany and it looked orange?
Yep.
Albany is not Washington, D.C., but there's enough people that will flood D.C. that will make that a pro-Syracuse crowd. I'm going to stick with the Hoosiers, but this would be a big-time atmosphere. Marquette and Colorado, look, if you haven't taken stock in what Buzz Williams has done at the Milwaukee School, you need to now. This is not his most talented roster, but it's his deepest roster. They can play big with Jameel Wilson at small forward and play Chris O'Toole and Devontae Gardner at the 4 and the 5. That's too much for Colorado up front, even though I like Colorado. I like Indiana against Marquette. And remember this, Buzz Williams worked for Tom Crean at Marquette before he got promoted to being a head coach.
All right, you have Louisville, Michigan State in the Midwest, Wisconsin and Arizona in the West. VCU and Florida in the South, Indiana and Marquette in the East. We'll come back and see who takes it the rest of the way right after this. Key stuff, including the latest on Mark Teixeira. All right, we're down to 8, the Elite 8, Louisville and Michigan State. Classic matchup. Well, you're going to take Louisville. I know it.
I'm going to take Louisville.
All right. I figured that. I know you're high on Louisville. Great matchup, though. 2 tournament champions, 2 of the best tournament coaches ever. So you're telling me right there you would have had Izzo and Coach K, and then Izzo and Pitino. Not too shabby. Wisconsin, Arizona.
I'm going to take Sean Miller in Arizona, a team that, again, was undefeated in the non-conference portion of the schedule. And I think a team still that when you look at their front court and you look at the bigs that they have, Grant Jarrett, Caleb Tarzewski, Brandon Ashley, all freshmen, huge upside, the most talented team in the West region, even though they're 6th seed. Arizona breaks through. Remember, Sean Miller's been the 2 Elite Eights, one at Xavier, one at Arizona.
Yes, been a very good tournament coach.
So I think, as we've talked about, and you said this, you got to roll the dice. If I have to roll the dice, I'm going to roll the dice on one of the best young coaches in the country, and I'm going to roll the dice on the other side on a coach who's another one of the best young coaches.
Well, yeah, not only have one of the best young, you also have a guy who's won 2 championships in Billy Donovan. So, Florida and then Shaka Smart. So where are you going, VCU?
I'm going with VCU.
Well, that's an interesting pick. All right. So, and then Indiana and Marquette.
This I wrestled with back and forth because I think Marquette, because of Devontae Gardner, can be the sleeper, and I think Marquette's depth will be a big factor, but Indiana has been resilient all year long. They've got tremendous offensive firepower. In a battle of Tom Crean against his former assistant, I will take Indiana to get to Atlanta, setting up Indiana VCU in a rematch of last year's tournament, and Louisville against Arizona. And I think if we could get those 4, that would be a fascinating Final Four.
Those 4 in Atlanta, And then I think there's 3 towns that are all, really 4 towns that are all very close there. You have Indianapolis, you have Cincinnati, you have Louisville, you have Lexington, all of them right there. Bloomington only an hour and a half away, so everybody right close to Indianapolis. And what do you have for your final? Louisville, I know you got Louisville. Louisville and who?
Louisville and Indiana.
Louisville and Indiana, and the champion is?
Rick Pitino and the Cardinals. He gets his second title. Louisville finishes the job. They lost last year to Kentucky, and I think, this year has been the most unpredictable year I've ever had in my years covering the sport. Usually, and you've always said this, you got to roll the dice on one bracket. I think this year it's 2. If I'm going to roll the dice, I'm going to roll the dice with Shaka Smart and roll the dice with Sean Miller.
An unnamed NBA personnel guy said, there is not one player that will step on an NCAA tournament court this year that I would tell you is a bona fide NBA star in the future. You know what that means? Is an amazing statement when you think about it.
You know what that tells you? How many upsets are there going to be?
A lot. Because, the idea, now, you used to say, in the old days, when you go back to the early 80s, when I did it for CBS and into the 90s when I did it, you used to say you needed at least 1 pro and you like to have 2. Mm-hmm. And that was usually the way you looked at it. You needed a pro to win it. And some of those teams, you go back. I had games where I had Jordan and Ewing, Olajuwon, go down the line.
Kid Gilchrist.
Right. And then a guy named Carmelo Anthony taking a team to a championship. And down the line.
Gordon.
Okafor. Many different guys. So, even a guy who never made it big, Purvis Ellison, as a rookie. So there are not the bigs anymore in college. There are not the greats anymore in college, and it means wide open. So a lot of teams like experience. The one team that's got a lot of experience of the big teams is Miami. They have a lot of experience. That's the one thing. They haven't been there before, but they do have a lot of experience.
And it's not just experience. It's extended experience. Julian Gamble, 6th year. Kenny Kaji, 5th year. Trey McKinney-Jones, 5th year. Durant Scott, all-ACC shooting guard, 4th year. No, they have all the requisites, but this year, more than any other year, you got to roll the dice. I've identified Colorado early. I like Tad Boyle. I like what he's building there. And again, people don't know across the country about Xavier Johnson. People don't know about Spencer Dinwiddie. They will after this tournament if they get by Illinois. I think Colorado's got a great chance, and I also think New York has a shot with Iona.
Oh, that'd be a huge win.
Can you imagine how about Iona Notre Dame on Saturday or Sunday?
That would get
Sunday.
Now listen, I've been a big Clue supporter. I pushed hard for him to get the Iona job. Pushed hard for him to get a couple different jobs.
What more does Tim Cluse have? He's won 70 games in 3 years.
Listen, the only thing that hurt in Tim Cluse is he got a late start. He was in high school for a long time. He was at Post. He's not young. For being in Iona, he's not young. Now he's probably 6 years old or 8 years older than he should be, okay? But somebody gave him a chance now at the next level. He will build a huge program.
Well, here's the thing I look at with Tim Cluse. He's been there 3 years, okay? Yeah. Iona has now become a national landing spot for players at high major conferences who want to come closer to home. And 70 wins in 3 years, 2 NCAA tournament appearances. And the year they don't go to the tournament, they lose to St. Peter's, which was a great job by John Dunn, another underrated coach in Jersey City. So he's had them in the mix in all 3 years. And, Mike, let's face it. The locals have struggled to get in the NCAA tournament. Iona has become a game. You're a basketball fan. You look on the calendar to see who they're playing.
He's done a great job. He's done a great job. I've been a big supporter of his for years, going back to when he was at St. Mary's in Manhasset. So, and I've known him since he was a basketball player. So, and even
know how much you like Tim Cluse, you like Aaron Kraft better.
Well, I just know how good Kraft is.
He's
a great player, and I think it's a bad matchup. I just think it is, but I do think Cluse has done enough where I'm not trying to, listen, I'm not trying to send anybody coaches packing, but part of it is moving up when the time is right, and I think he's right there. Give me another guy. You like the Colorado coach a lot, right? That's your guy to become a hot coach.
He's cemented, in terms of the mid-major level?
No, as far as being the next rising star. Who's your guy?
Sean Miller, people...
But he's already a star, Sean Miller. He's at Arizona. He doesn't have to leave Arizona. He can stay at Arizona the next 15 years. He doesn't have to go anywhere. Arizona's a great program.
Yeah, in this tournament, a guy that I think, may move to a bigger job is Steve Alford. at New Mexico could get a second job. And I think, as we look and we continue to evolve,
I think Alford's happy at New Mexico, probably. He can win there. He can win there.
I mean, the interesting...
You don't have to leave anymore. Shaka Smart and Brad Stevens have proved that you don't have to leave anymore. You can stay put and win.
Well, no, Shaka's going to have a top 25 team at VCU.
Right,
if he stays.
And Brad Stevens is not leaving. He's staying at Butler, and he keeps winning there.
I've said this over the weekend, and, John Giannini at LaSalle, he built the program at Rowan. He built the program at Maine. He built the program at LaSalle. He's from Chicago. He knows how to build a program. I don't know if he fits the exact criteria in terms of having an academic, but he's a guy I think could be a fit at Northwestern. And also, Dave Paulson at Bucknell is a guy, when he was at Williams, the president of Williams is now the president of Northwestern. He fits kind of the look of somebody who could be the next coach at Northwestern, just thinking ahead. But, as we look and as we see the mid-major term kind of go away, you brought up a good question. Who's the next guy that could be a rising coach? All the coaches that have arrived already are in the bracket. Meaning you don't look at somebody at a mid-major school anymore thinking, are they going to jump? Because Shaka Smart and Brad Stevens aren't going to jump.
No, they don't have to. They proved they don't have to. That has been the one thing that changed. Ione still have to jump. At VCU and at Butler, you don't have to. Butler... VCU, Gonzaga, they've proved they've cemented themselves as those kind of programs.
And Tommy Amaker has already been to the BCS League.
He's found his home. I think he really did. John will be on CBS Sports Network. They have over 100 hours of coverage coming up, and he picks Louisville over Indiana. That sounds like something Mink would pick. Mink, who'd you pick? What was your final?
I haven't done it yet, but I like Louisville, and I like Indiana. Those two.
Mink, of course, who worked in Indianapolis all those years. That's why getting back to his roots. Thank you, John, very much.
See you next week, Mike.
Enjoy it. And we'll talk to John when we get it down to 16 next week.